Welcome back, guys, to the GSMC Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We just got done talking about a debate with the MMA safety rules and guidelines, and we're now going to talk about the House v. NCAA settlement's effect on women's sports. This is a huge turning point in college athletics. Now, this is mainly about college football, but it does have a lot of effects on Title IX and women's college sports, and I wanted to give my take on my worries, my opinions, and what I think could happen. We are first going to go over some background information of what this settlement is and everything you need to know. This is honestly a lot of information in this case. It gets a little wordy and confusing, so it did take me a very long time to actually understand this. Also, just like any sort of settlement law thing, legal thing, there's a lot of confusing language in there, so it's fair to be confused. Anyway, I'm just going to give some background information. So the House v. NCAA settlement signifies a line in the sand. Not since 1984's NCAA v. Board of Regents of the University of Oklahoma have we seen a court ruling fundamentally alter the landscape of college athletics in this manner, in the sense of the extremity. Not only does the settlement distribute roughly $2.8 billion in name, image, and likeness backpay, also known as NIL, but it also establishes a framework for future athlete revenue sharing. Details still need to be sorted out, but it's a landmark step towards getting players in on the financial windfall they generate. At long last, the players will get a cut of billions of dollars flooding into the NCAA conferences and individual schools. While the advent of NIL compensation was a step in this direction, those payments come largely through third-party collectives funded by big money boosters and average fans. Now, the athletic departments themselves are finally on the hook financially for the labor that fuels their products and underpins their budgets. On the other side, for decades, the NCAA fought on behalf of its member schools to preserve the amateurism model. This officially marks the end of that war. While the House Treaty ensures that NCAA survival as an organization, it will be a diminished entity on the hook for $1.1 billion of the settlement. That money will come from its reserves and through budget cuts. The entire system of college athletics was built on the idea of an unpaid labor force. With the highest cost in the sport unlimited, universities were free to spend nearly unlimited money on coaching and administrative salaries, facility upgrades, and much more. According to a USA Today analysis, programs wasted nearly $200 million on coaching buyouts alone during the 2023 season, an incomprehensible and frankly offensive amount of waste. Considering that the bulk of coaching salaries come from booster fundraising, it remains unlikely that high salaries will go away completely. However, programs will have to be much smarter about spending limited resources. The focus on facilities has lessons as name, image, and likeness payments take focus, and that should only increase now. The NCAA is considering removing the cap on guaranteed scholarships across sport. Instead of limiting compensation, the NCAA would attempt to protect competition by focusing on roster sizes. Right now, football teams can field 120 players, but are limited to 85 scholarships. In a future system, rosters could shrink to 100 players, but all of them could be on scholarships. That's not even counting for supplemental income from revenue sharing. But while football is the big fish, other sports could truly reap the benefits. But baseball teams are limited to 11.7 scholarships on a 39-man roster. That could change, but the Title IX implications could also be significant, as schools would have to fund 27 additional scholarships for women's sports. The increased scholarship obligations will be yet another major cost for universities. Not every program will be able to handle them, which will create yet another gap. The NCAA tournament does benefit from this, as it will preserve the NCAA tournament itself. But here's what I'm most concerned about: non-revenue sports. And I don't prefer using that term, but it is the term that people do use, so we're just going to go with it. At most schools, the non-revenue sports are basically everything other than men's football and basketball. It's often women's sports, which is a huge issue that we will get into. But basically, in addition to potential measures such as staff cuts and delayed facilities upgrades, non-revenue sports could be eliminated. And that is a real big risk for schools that are already struggling with financial issues. With the new revenue sharing model, athletic departments may need to reallocate their budgets to accommodate back pay and future payments to athletes. Since men's football and basketball are generally the revenue generating sport, they are likely to remain protected. However, women's sports, which typically do not generate as much revenue or in some places significant revenue, may see budget cuts. Fewer scholarships could be available for female athletes, which might limit opportunities for young women to pursue higher education alongside sports, and less popular, less visible women's sports program might be completely cut, which obviously reduces the diversity of sports offerings and limits the participation offering opportunities for female athletes. Women have worked very hard for years to get the recognition they deserve in the world of sports, and this risk of cutting certain women's sports is really alarming to me. A lot of athletes start at the collegiate level, where they make their name really known, and then they move on to the Olympics and professional leagues and such. I mean, we wouldn't know Caitlin Clark if she wasn't that amazing star at the University of Iowa. And by removing some sports from the collegiate level, there are less opportunities for women to enter the Olympics and professional leagues. Now, when I say Caitlin Clark, I don't think that women's basketball would be cut anywhere. I don't. It generates a lot of revenue at most schools. Let's take a school, for example, and just show how they would be affected. This is just a hypothetical example, okay? And we're going to use Texas A&M for our example. We all know what that school is. Like, it's a huge school. It's known for its sports and academics. Women's golf is their least profitable sport. They made the least amount of revenue last year in women's golf. There are 9 people on the team's roster and a total of 3 coaches. If women's golf was completely cut from Texas A&M, not only would these 3 coaches lose their jobs, but these 9 athletes would lose their scholarships, passion, and commitment to the sport. For some, maybe these scholarships are the only thing that is helping them be able to afford and attend the university. So, like, what are they supposed to do? Like, just drop out of school? Like, it doesn't make sense. For some people, they are going to school because they play a sport, and for others, they're playing a sport to go to school. Also, these 9 athletes could be potential contenders in the Olympics. If their ability to play for their school was taken away from them, then they don't really have that same fair opportunity as everyone else to go try out for the Olympics. They don't have the ability to practice at a high level at a known university. It's not practical or in anywhere fair to just cut certain sports, especially women's sports. I also just want to go back to the Texas A&M thing. I don't think that women's golf will be just eliminated from Texas A&M. It still produces pretty good revenue. That was just an example because it's a well-known school. Anyway, I'm not saying that it's literally going to be eliminated. It was just a hypothetical example. Okay, anyway, moving on. I don't think it's practical or in any way fair to just cut certain sports, especially women's sports. Title IX ensures that women have equal opportunities to men in all aspects of educational programs, including athletics. Reducing or eliminating women's sports can lead to a disproportionate impact on female athletes, potentially violating federal law. And I'm so sorry, I just choked on my spit. Ensuring compliance becomes more complex when budgets are tight, and the focus might unintentionally shift to preserving revenue-generating sports, which are predominantly male-dominated. Another thing I wanted to mention is that as certain sports are cut, and I mean female and male sports, the diversity is reduced, which is terrible for a school's culture. Also, schools that cut women's sports specifically risk damaging the reputation among prospective students, alumni, and the broader community. Such actions can be viewed as a step backward in terms of gender equality and fairness, which might deter prospective students and donors, impacting the university's overall appeal and financial help. So really, cutting the sport wouldn't really do much good for the school financially when you think about it, and in the long term. Furthermore, women's sports have historically received less media coverage than men's sports. It has gotten better, but it has historically received less media coverage. With financial constraints, there might be even less incentive for college and media athletes to promote women's sports, which can affect the growth of these sports in terms of fan base and future revenue potential. This decreased visibility also impacts athletes' ability to capitalize on NIL opportunities. The shift in how college sports are financed and valued might influence long-term advocacy and support for women's sports. If women's sports are perceived as financially unsustainable or less important, it could set back efforts to promote gender equality in sports. This is critical, as the support for women's sports also influences broader societal attitudes towards women in general, and sports and the professional level. So we're now going to move on to our next and last segment, where we talk about the CrossFit semifinals in the North American West and Oceania regions. This was all just a lot of information. I do have a lot of takes on this issue, especially regarding female sports, obviously. There is just a lot to discuss on here. So we are just going to go ahead and start talking about our next segment after we take a little short break. So I will see you guys really soon.